So the Gemara that we're learning, we're on 62b, and we were learning a Gemara about Kapendaria, which we, interestingly enough, had two interpretations what Kapendaria is yesterday. We mentioned that there is an interpretation here that Kapendaria, according to Rava, is a Greek word which means you shouldn't gather together to schmooze, to hang out on the Har Habayis. And Rav Chana bar Ada argued and said, no, Kapendaria is a shortcut. And the other way of learning our Gemara is that really Rav was also saying Kapendaria means a shortcut. He just thought everyone knows what the word means. And he said Kapendaria is, if it's like it sounds. And Rav Chana bar Ada, in the name of Rav Sama Bereder Rav Murray, says that he explains what Rava really meant, and that is that it's like a combination of a few words about basically instead of going around, go up, go straight, and basically a shortcut. And this has to do with the prohibition of using the Har Habayis as a shortcut. Now, then the Gemara mentioned about a person shouldn't use a shul as a shortcut. And there are a lot of laws that are similar to this, and they're learned in Tractate Megillah, and that is laws about, are you allowed to enter a shul on a very hot day and the shul has air conditioning? Would you be allowed to enter? It's raining outside. So would you be allowed to enter the shul? Again, we're not talking about entering the lounge part of the shul. We're talking about entering an actual shul that opens right up. You're entering the door straight into the shul, into the synagogue room. Would that be allowed? Because you're basically using the synagogue for your own purposes. And there is a concept of saying a pasuk, reciting a verse in the shul, and that might be a permit to either either call someone or to go there to learn. If you hang out there a little, not just to go in and let's say you have to call someone out, someone has a phone call outside, would you be allowed to enter the shul for the purpose of calling someone to come out? And so these are different halachas that deal with respect for a shul, using a shul for other purposes. Our Gemara, our Mishnah mentioned this idea of dealing with the Beis Hamikdash. And our Mishnah was dealing with it because as I mentioned yesterday, that it had to do with Avas Hashem. Once we mentioned Avas Hashem, we mentioned Yiras Hashem. So we spoke about loving Hashem and the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, and what does it mean? And about it. I shouldn't say accepting the yoke of heaven. It's about accepting the judgment of Hashem, and we spoke about b'chol midah, whatever Hashem does for you. We thank Hashem for, and kashem shem avarchen ala toiv, the same way you thank Hashem for the good. So it all led into this idea, this law of respect for the Beis Hamikdash, and basically the Temple Mount. Is a level that leads into, or it's in front of the Beis Hamikdash, and it has certain laws as well. So the Gemara then mentioned that this law applies to a shul, and that if you enter a shul, you also, shouldn't really use it as a kapendaria, as a shortcut. But if you're doing it for not to do it as a shortcut, then it would be mutter, that would be permissible. So the point of this statement is that it's saying that it's normally prohibited to enter a shul as a shortcut, but if you're doing it not having in mind as a shortcut, it would be permissible to use as a shortcut, and that would be like you're entering it for a mitzvah, and you end up leaving on at a door that's easier and shorter for you to leave. So you're benefiting from it, but that's okay because you entered for a mitzvah. And Rabavo said that if it used to be a road, so a pathway, then you would be allowed as well to use it as a shortcut. And we explained yesterday that this is called b'diavad. This is not preferable to do. This is after the fact. If you're stuck in a tight situation and it's really urgent, and so that would be you have a permit here to use it, but it's not preferable. And the source, the reason to explain it this way, I mean, it does say it's permissible. So how do we know to say that it doesn't mean it's a permit? It's an outright permit. Maybe this is an outright permit. And the answer is because you see from the next Gemara that it says that if you enter a shul, then you are allowed to make it a shortcut. Now, if it's telling you that a shul you're allowed to make a shortcut, and the previous Gemara said if you're entering for a mitzvah purpose or for you are allowed to make it a shortcut, why would you think that if you enter it for davening would be any different? So on this, the way to answer this contradiction is to explain that, if you're going to daven, that's fine. Then you can preferably use it as a shortcut. And the reason for that is because even in the Beis Hamikdash, they specifically did that. They would enter in the north, they'd go out the south. They would enter in the south, go out the north. They specifically went out the opposite direction that they came in. And so therefore, when it comes to davening, which is similar to bringing sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash, it would be the same law, that you would go in one side and come out the other side. That would be preferable. That's fine. That's 100% okay to do in a shul. But if you're just going for a mitzvah, that's when it says it's mutter. And if it was a road before, it's mutter. That mutter over there, when it says permissible, mutter means permissible. That when it says that it's permissible, it means that it's okay. It's not the ideal. It's not the preferable thing to do. And then we also mentioned that another interpretation that that has a different version here. But before I get to that, I do want to mention there is a Gemara in Megillah that says that a certain rabbi explains why he merited to have longevity. And he says, because I never made a shul a shortcut. Now, what does that mean? He never made a shul a shortcut. That's a law. That's a halacha. Of course, who's making, that's the law. I'm sure all the rabbis didn't make a shul a shortcut. So why would he take credit? Normally, if you're explaining why you merited longevity, you're probably going to say something to the effect of, I did an extra credit mitzvah. I did something, a bonus. I went above and beyond. You're not going to say, I put on tefillin every day. Of course I lived long. Normally you're explaining why you live long. You're going to say something that's unique because everyone puts tefillin on. Everyone keeps Shabbos, every from Yid keeps and not everyone merits longevity. But you're saying, why I think I merited longevity is, because of this unique mitzvah that I was extra, I bent over backwards and when I wasn't obligated to, when I still did this mitzvah. So what does he mean that I didn't make it a shortcut and therefore I merited longevity? So according to this explanation that we just said, maybe any of you want to answer this question. Why would he say that he didn't make it a shortcut? How could that help him? How would that be like a bonus? He didn't make it a shortcut, so therefore he merited longevity. I thought it's a halacha. You're not allowed to make a shul a shortcut. Yes, Ben.
Maybe because if you came in for praying, then you get merit on the prayers.
So when he came in for prayers, even when he came in for prayers, he went out the same way he came in. Is that what you want to say?
If he did,
then he's saying I deserve, I merited longevity because I was so careful. Even with prayer, I didn't make it a shortcut. The only problem with that is that it sounds like from our Gemara that it's 100% permissible, maybe even ideal, because there's even another version that says it's ideal to do that. So I don't know if you can explain it that way. It sounds like it could be such a thing. Yes, Moshe.
It's kapsut. He's showing kapsut to Shah Hashem. He's by doing the longer.
Yes,
but
route. This is a halacha. Normally, if you say, you know why I won the lotto? Hashem was so proud of me. Therefore, because I made kiddush on Shabbos. No, I don't think that's why you won the lotto, because you made kiddush on Shabbos. I don't think you won the lotto because you put tefillin on. I think I think you put tefillin on. You did what every yid does. But that's not why you won the lotto. But if you told me that you once you risked your life to save someone else and help someone, then I would say maybe that's why you won the lotto. You know what I mean? So you're going to tell me, oh, he was careful not to walk through the shul. Okay, that's a halacha. That's like putting tefillin on, So what does this mean? So according to the way we explained it, you could say, similar to what Ben is saying, but a little different, and that is that he was careful even in a case where he was allowed to, but it's just not preferable. Even there, he was careful. So, for example, even in a shul that used to be a pathway, even there he was careful not to make it a shortcut. Even when he was going to do a mitzvah, but not to daven. To daven, he made it a shortcut because the Gemara tells us that that's fine. And according to some versions, it's even a mitzvah to do. But even when he was allowed to, he had whatever situation he was in, he would have been permitted to, you're allowed to. It's not ideal, but it's permissible to, if it used to be a path, or he entering for a mitzvah. So in these cases, he's allowed to use it as a shortcut. Even there, he was careful not to, because ideally you really shouldn't do that. But it's not a prohibition. You have a permit. You're permitted to do it. It's not ideal. So on that, he's saying, you know what? I went above and beyond. That's why I merited longevity. I did this extra thing to honor Hashem, not to use his shul as a means for a gain for my interests. Okay, so that's the way they would explain this Gemara. Now, Rav Chelbo, in the name of Rav Huna, had said that it's a person who enters for davening, he's permitted to use it as a shortcut. And that we explained meant that there's another version to that, and that it's a mitzvah to make it a shortcut, and that's based on the fact that by the Beis Hamikdash, you had a similar thing. People who came for the holidays, the person who came from the north would go out the south. The person who came from the south would go to the north. So there seems to be a source that you want to show how much you love the Beis Hamikdash and the Makam Hamikdash and the mountain, the Temple Mount, and therefore they would go out the opposite side of where they came in, showing their cherishing of the temple. So that's basically the conclusion of that little piece. And then comes the next piece of Gemara with regard to the law of spitting in a shul, and spitting in the base and by the Makam Hamikdash, by the Temple Mount. Now, and what about nowadays spitting in the Temple Mount? So the Gemara brought the Mishnah. Rikika is prohibited. Spitting is prohibited from a kal v'chomer, from an a priori argument. And Rav Bibi said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Levi, if you spit even today in Har Habayis, in the Temple Mount, it's as if you're spitting on Hashem's eye, because it says that his eyes and his heart is there all the days. And what does all the days mean? All the days over here means not just in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem's eyes and heart are there even in the time of exile. And you can imagine what type of a Shchinta Begalusa, the Shechina is in exile now with the Muslims all there on the Temple Mount and the mosque there on the Temple Mount. And what a painful feeling it must be, so to speak, for Hashem, whose heart and eyes are right there on the Temple Mount. And but if a person spits there, it's inappropriate, even when the Beis Hamikdash is not there, because Hashem's eyes and heart are there all the days. Kol hayomim. So then Rava said that spitting in a shul is permissible, and this is learned similar from the law of shoes. Just like shoes, you could have in a shul, you don't have it in the shoes are permitted in a shul, even though on harabayas it would be prohibited. So therefore, spitting would be also permitted in a shul. So the Gemara said that Rav Papa asked Rava. He said, or it's Ravina asked Rava, or Rav Adi Bar Mas asked Rava. He says, why are you learning from shoes that? Well, let me tell you what the wording of Rava's wording was. Spitting in shul is permissible because similar to shoes, just like shoes, this is the wording, just like shoes on harabayas on Temple Mount is prohibited, but in a shul is permissible. So also spitting, it's prohibited in Temple Mount, but it's permissible in a shul. Yes, Robert.
When I'm reading this whole paragraph, to me, there's a lot of contradictions in it that I don't necessarily understand, because while, there's all these prohibitions about bringing your staff in, bringing your shoes in, bringing money in, but then at the very end, it says, put off your shoes from off your feet, for the place which upon you stand is holy ground, all the more so spitting, which is considered contemptuous. So it's like one thing, it says it's permitted, but the other thing, and all these other are contradictions of the process, which to me is very confusing.
So let me tell you, the reason the one is talking about on the Temple Mount,
right?
And
then the other one is a synagogue.
Is in a shul, right?
Right. So but isn't the whole idea that if you have all these things, they're treif, they're dirty, and you compromise in the synagogue in your devotion, in your prayer, and the pathway is like it's a convenience to do that, so you can go out the rear door when you come in through the front door, and so it's a compromise of praying in shul. So
you're saying that you think even davening, it shouldn't be appropriate to, even if a person is going there to pray, he shouldn't be able to leave a different door.
Because your previous intent was to have a shortcut. And by the way, while you're going through shul, praying gets in the way for you to be able to exit the shul. So how serious or devotional can you be when you really want the convenience of getting through the building?
So I didn't see the Gemara saying it that way.
Well, I don't know if it says that, but that to me is part of what the logic is relative to everything else is forbidden, but it's okay to go through the shul.
So the simple way of learning this was the opposite idea, that you're going to daven. After davening, you could choose whatever exit you want to go. Your main purpose of entering was to daven. Not that your main purpose of entering is to find a shortcut. And you know what? Oh, I need to daven. Okay, so I'll daven in order to be able to make this a shortcut. That we didn't really say is permissible. Yep. I don't know anyone that would do that, actually, because it would take more longer to pray than to go around. So most, you know what I mean? I don't see that as such a practical thing either, because most people don't like praying so much. So they would say, let me go around the block instead. I'm not entering the shul and praying in order to use it as a shortcut. But anyway, our Gemara didn't really say that. Whether that's permissible or not, again, we could think about it and discuss it. But the main issue that our Gemara was talking about is you went in for another purpose, to do a mitzvah, to daven. This used to be a shortcut, and before the shul was built. So the question was, what about these situations would you be allowed to use, to end up benefiting from it? So it's not really, the term is wrong that we're using it as a shortcut.
Right.
Really, you're benefiting from it. That's really the term.
My understanding is if somebody's going to go to shul, they've done this before, so they know they can use the shul as a shortcut. It may be a momentary inconvenience because they have to daven, but they still have their intent of walking through the shul to get to their destination. To me, that's a compromise. that shouldn't
So,
happen.
so the simple understanding of our Gemara is that he's doing a full-fledged prayer, which means like a 15-minute mincha, or a 15-minute ma'ariv, or a 45-minute shachris. And I just don't know anyone that would do that. I need to go through. In other words, we're not talking in our Gemara about a person saying a verse and saying, "Oh, I can now use it as a shortcut." Our Gemara is not talking about that type of situation. Our Gemara is talking about a person is davening, doing the mincha, doing a ma'ariv, he's doing, you know what I mean? He's coming into shul, he's doing his prayer, and now he wants to leave. His car happens to be in the back, and so is he allowed to, or is that inappropriate? You know, you are benefiting from the shul. The shul doesn't lose anything. I could use the front door, the back door. It's the same cost to the shul. Is it inappropriate or is it not? So the Gemara says that, you know what, in the Beis Hamikdash, this was actually done. There was an element of cherishing that you wanted to show that you want to get to be in, you want to be part of the entire holy synagogue, or in the Temple Mount. It was, you wanted to go cherished Hashem's holy place, so you wanted to walk over through the whole thing. So that would be similar here, and there's actually an element, according to one opinion, that's actually how he learns the Gemara, that it doesn't say mutter, it's allowed. He says it's a mitzvah to do this. So again, we're not talking about your scenario. Your scenario comes up in a different Gemara. There is a Gemara that talks about calling someone out of a shul and or entering a shul and maybe saying a pasuk or using a shul, but you end up doing a mitzvah there, or saying some Torah there, or hanging out there in order to be able to use a shul. Again, that's not our case. Our case is you're either doing a mitzvah there, and you want to go out the back door. You're going there for the mitzvah. You're going there for the davening, and you're going out the back door because it might benefit. You could benefit from it. So it's a different purpose that we're dealing with here. So I think I'm not pushing off your question.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I think your question deserves to be asked on those Gemaras where you have that idea that what should one do if it's raining and if it's and you really want to go in, but it's a shul. So could you or can't you? And what would the permit be? And would it be inappropriate? And is that only like after the fact? Is it preferable? Is it acceptable? You know, would that be disrespectful? Is that disrespectful to the shul, using the shul? So it's definitely a good question. Yes,
right.
Yes.
To me, this to me finishes that to me it's a false feel good activity. All right. And
but what about if you were freezing outside? Would you say the same thing?
Well,
if you were freezing and it was raining,
I could go out the back door. The inconvenience of praying warms me up, so I can then go out the back door and do what I want to do.
So would you do that? I'm saying if it was raining,
I wouldn't do it. No, I wouldn't do it because it compromises the whole idea of praying. For the
I think you're going to have
warming up and getting through the back door of the shul.
I think, Robert, you're going to have longevity.
I don't know. But anyways, it's good to have these arguments and I appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say not about the walking to shul, but about the spitting.
Yeah. Yes, this is a big thing on your...
is not allowed because it's spitting in God's eye, in the Beit HaMikdash, right? But we know that the Shekhinah always also rests in the Bet Knesset. Why isn't it spitting in his eye in the Bet Knesset? Why do they compare it to shoes? How can you compare it to a shoe?
Right. So the simple understanding, I think, is that there's different levels of Shekhinah. We like, as our Gemara says, that here it's like Hashem's eyes and heart is there, but we know Hashem is everywhere, right? So there's a level. There are different levels of the Shekhinah, and more revelation and more. You know, there's in certain places it would be more serious. So obviously in Har HaBayis,
they're both holy places.
Yeah, yeah. But you have to realize that even your house is holy. And
My house is only holy if I pray there.
Not exactly. A Yid lives there, and Hashem is everywhere. So every place has a little holiness there. There's a soul. The souls are everywhere. The spark of holiness is everywhere. There's definitely the Shechina as
right, and also the evidence of a mezuzah provides for it being a holy place.
That's right. That's right. And thank you, Robert. Right. And Es Hashemayim v'Ha'aretz Ani Malei says Hashem fills the heavens and the earth.
I wouldn't want anybody coming in and spitting in my house.
Okay, so we're gonna talk a little about the spitting here because I brought the Shulchan Aruch here, so we'll get into that. But so let's just go through the Gemara part. So the Gemara mentioned that Rava's statement was that he learned from Shu that a shoe is prohibited in Temple Mount, but shoes are permissible in a synagogue. And this also touches on that idea that the shul, there's the Shechina in the shul, but still you could wear a shoe. You could wear shoes in the shul, but you wouldn't be allowed to wear the shoe on the Temple Mount. So the same thing would apply to spitting. Spitting in the Temple Mount is prohibited, but spitting in a shul would be permissible. Now the Gemara then says, Rav Papa asked, one of these rabbis, a few different options of which rabbi it was. It said, why are you learning the law of spitting from shoes? Learn the law of spitting. Why am I echoing? Let me mute everyone.
I have one more thing to say about the spitting.
Yeah.
My son just moved to the east for 2 years from work.
Mm-hmm.
And there, if you spit on the street, they arrest you.
What city is this?
It's not a city, it's an island. What is the island? It's the richest island where all the rich people buy the places.
Okay. In which area? By Chicago?
No.
Yeah, where?
I mean the east. I mean next to Thailand. I think not far from. Yeah. It's the richest island in the world.
And he moved there? Your
Indian Creek Island?
No. Greek is not by Thailand.
Well, you talk about in Indonesia somewhere. You can essentially, you spit and you can go to jail, right? Or you chew gum on the street.
Right.
Wow.
They arrest you, that's it, for
wow.
that. Because, it's not hygienic.
Wow.
And doesn't even look good. You see people walking around spitting. I mean.
Wow. I wonder in jail if they allow you to spit.
You keep staying there. They never let you out.
Only in the spittoons.
Right. You have to bring your own spittoon wherever you go.
Okay. Anyway, so thank you, Ben, for mentioning that there are places in the world where it's where really it's a criminal act to spit. Rav Papa, one of these rabbis asked Rava that why you're learning from shoes, learn from kapendarya, from shortcuts that we learned. Of course, the general rule is you're not allowed to make a shul a shortcut. We found there are some leniencies, certain situations, certain times that it's not ideal, but it's okay, and certain times that it's even permissive, it's even a mitzvah, or maybe or it is ideal. But the fact is that the general rule is that you're not allowed to make a shul a shortcut. And if so, we should say, if you can't make a shul a shortcut, you can't just spit in a shul, right? Should we learn it from there? Why are you learning from shoes? Shoes you're allowed to wear in a shul, so therefore you can spit. But what about the shortcut? Shortcut you're not allowed to do in a shul. So say the shortcut you can't do in a shul. Spitting also you can't do in a shul. So the Gemara said that. So the Gemara answered that by saying that we have a brisa. The brisa says that you learn from shoes about spitting. That's how the brisa. That was the teaching of this brisa, and it said clearly the words "urikika mikal v'chaymer mi minol," that you learn spitting from a priori argument from minol, from shoes. That shoes is not really a disgrace. It's ein by derech bizayin, and yet the Torah says remove your shoes. So therefore, rikika, spitting, which is a derech bizayin, so therefore, how much more so it should be prohibited on the temple. It should be prohibited spitting on the Temple Mount, and I'm sorry, it should be prohibited on the Temple Mount. So you see that the Brisa learned from shoes that on the Temple Mount spitting is prohibited, and if that's so, if we're learning from shoes, then that would mean that shoes are permitted in a synagogue, spitting is permitted in a synagogue. Now, Rabbi Yossi didn't like this teaching, didn't like the proof. He liked the teaching, he didn't like the proof. One of the commentaries says he didn't like the proof because we'll bring a proof from one explanation is he brought a proof from the story of the sneh, which is the bush that was that Moses saw the burning bush, and Hashem told him, take off your shoes. Now that story happened before the giving of the Torah, so therefore Rabbi Yossi says, I don't know if you could really learn proof from that, from something that was before the Torah was given. After the Torah was given, that's that's when you have the laws. Before the Torah was given, they weren't really obligated. That didn't really affect the Jewish law, and it's like a whole new set of laws were given at the giving of the Torah, and therefore, he's going to bring a different proof. So, or another explanation is that maybe there was more Shechina over there. There's more revelation than there is on the Temple Mount. In other words, that was like a great revelation to Moses. And how do you know that on Temple Mount it has the same level of Shechina? Again, Temple Mount was holy, but to what extent? The Holy of Holies is it would be maybe a good comparison, or the holies in the temple. The Beis Hamikdash itself would be maybe a comparison to the revelation at the sneh, the burning bush. But is it really a comparison to the Temple Mount? Maybe the Temple Mount would not be an issue. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi learns from another source. And what is the other source? He says, because it says in the Megillah Esther, it says that you should not enter the king's palace with sackcloth, like clothing of a mourner. And this is his Kal V'chomer. He makes an a priori argument that just like sackcloth, that's not disgusting, not disgraceful. It's in front of a so sackcloth, that's einay ma'os. It's not disgusting, and it's only in front of a human, and still it's you can't enter the king's palace or even the king's gate with sackcloth. So also spitting, which is disgusting, or for sure spitting, which is disgusting, before the King of all kings, for sure should be prohibited. So that is his Kal V'chomer. So he makes an a priori argument based on the story of the book of Esther that you wouldn't be allowed to enter the king's gate, stand by the king's gate with sackcloth. So therefore, for sure, spitting should be prohibited before Hashem, the King of all kings, and so that's the brisa. Now, what we see from that brisa is that spitting is similar to shoes. So now, the last few words on the page, the rabbi that initially asked this question, Papa, Ravina, or Rabbi Bar Masna, whoever asked it to Rava, it's unclear, the Gemara is unclear of exactly who asked this question, but he now explains his question a little stronger. And he says, you didn't really answer me by saying you found the brisa that says compare it to shoes. Spitting should be compared to shoes. Very nice, you found that brisa, but it doesn't answer my question. And so now that we're on the bottom line of 62b, and we're going to read his explanation of his question a little better. So 62b, the bottom line. Amar Le, so he told Rava, whoever this rabbi was, whichever one it is, he told Rava, and he said, Ana hachi ka'amina, this is what I meant to say. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Nema hacha l'chumra v'hacha l'chumra. Let us say that here we are strict, and here we are strict. What is here and what is here? Here would mean Har Habayis, the Temple Mount, and here would mean the Shul. That on the Temple Mount, you could learn that we know that wearing shoes is prohibited. So for sure, spitting should be prohibited. In a shul, we could learn from shortcut that just like a shortcut is prohibited for a shul, how much more so spitting should be prohibited in a shul. So in other words, what we're asking Rava is that your way of teaching that we should learn from, your way of deriving these laws, that we're going to learn them from shoes, is not a very strong method of proving a Jewish law. Why is it not a strong method? Because when it comes to shoes, when it comes to prohibiting something, then obviously if shoes are prohibited, then spitting is prohibited. But when it comes to permitting something, you can't say if shoes are permitted, you're going to tell me that spitting is permitted? Spitting is much worse. If you want to prohibit something, so tell me something that's not as bad as spitting is prohibited, then spitting would sure be prohibited. But when you want to come to permit something, you can't say, oh, if shoes are permitted, then spitting is permitted. That wouldn't be you wouldn't be able to prove that. That's not an a priori argument now. So better learn from shortcuts. Now, a shortcut in a shul is prohibited. Then I would say, a priori argument. Yes, shortcut is prohibited. Spitting for sure should be prohibited. So ve'ema and say, and now he explains himself. We're on page 63a, everyone. Ve'ema and say, Harabayas the Yasser B'mino, the Temple Mount is prohibited to wear shoes, to enter with shoes. Lelfa Mimino, we can learn spitting from shoes. When it comes to prohibited things, we can learn it from shoes. Aval Beis HaKnesses, Deshari B'mino, but a shul that is permitted in shuls, instead of learning from shoes, Adiyolef Mimino, instead of learning from shoes, Ulaheter, and try to permit it, Neilaf Mi Kapendaria, Ula Isra, let us learn from shortcut and prohibit it. And this would be a very strong, it would seem to be a good proof. It would seem to be a good logic of why it should be prohibited to spit in a shul. So we tried to disprove Rava's proof, and now Rava comes back and he says an interesting thing. Ella Amar Rava, rather Rava says, Ma Beisai a Kapendaria Kapedinish, just like a house. I think I skipped two words. Ki Beisai, just like one's house. Ma Beisai, just like in one's house. A Kapendaria Kapedinish. He's careful. You don't want people walking through your house as a shortcut. Arakika umina like Kapedinish, but you don't mind if people are wearing shoes in your house, and you don't mind if people spit in your house. So af Beis HaKnesses, also a shul, should be like your house. Kapendaria gudazer. Kapendaria is prohibited. You don't want people walking through your house as a shortcut. That's not you want to lock your door and that's it. You want privacy, but you don't mind when you have a guest there or with your family. You don't mind if they wear shoes in your house, and you don't mind if they spit in your house. So therefore, Rakiko uminol shari, spitting and shoes are permitted. So the conclusion of Rava sounds like he's learning now from logic. What would you want in your house? If in your house it's okay, so therefore in a shul it should be okay. That's basically his conclusion. Now, one of the commentaries says, "What, you're going to compare your house, your shul, to your house instead of comparing it to the shul is holy? Shouldn't you compare it more to the?" So he says, "No, a shul you actually eat inside the shul, and for the scholars they learn there, and it's the chachamim, the talmideim, they're permitted to eat in their place of study, and if so, it's considered like your house." And now, therefore, he says that the shul should be similar to a house, and the house is this is okay. So, what does that sound like? It sounds like we're retracting from the learning it from shu, and we're just comparing it to one's house. Now, if you learn that way, you're going to have Ben's question. Ben says that I don't want anyone spitting in my house. So according to that, we really should be spitting in shuls. It should be prohibited to spit in a shul, because nowadays people are careful not to spit. In other words, if spitting is based on what person would do in their house, so therefore it would seem that if in a house people you don't want anyone spitting in your house, and you yourself don't spit in your house, so therefore in a shul it should also be prohibited. There is another way of learning the Gemara, and this is mentioned in the Rosh, that Rava he's not basing the whole permit on the house. He's basing it on his previous teaching that you learn it from the shoe. That is just like shoes are permitted in a synagogue. Also, spitting is permitted in a synagogue. And how do you know to learn from a shoe and not from a shortcut? You'll know that because there's reason to say that it should be similar to your house. And if it's similar to your house, it would make sense to learn it from a shoe instead of then from a shortcut. In other words, you're learning it from the fact that you don't wear shoes in the Temple Mount, but this would explain why are we learning it from the prohibition of wearing shoes on the Temple Mount, and we're not learning it from the prohibition of a shortcut. Now, according to that, question would be, what about nowadays? Nowadays, we don't spit in our house. Rava said that you learn it from minol, from the fact that the shoes, and we have a brisa that says you compare it to the shoe, to the prohibition of shoes in the Temple Mount, and the permit of shoes in a synagogue. And if shoes are permitted in a synagogue, the same thing should apply to spitting, should be permitted in a synagogue. And why is he learning it from this? Because it's similar to house. What about nowadays? Nowadays, would you say prohibited to no one wants you spitting in their house? So would you say now we should learn it from a kapendaria? Do we change? Does our limud change now because the practicality of today changed, or do we say no, it's the same thing as it always was? Again, according to this new way of learning, according to the previous way of learning that I said, that the Gemara is retracting from the previous way of understanding it, then it would sound like now would be prohibited to spit in a shul. Why? Because you don't spit in your house. You're going to spit in a shul? So it would sound like it's 100% prohibited. It's interesting that in Shulchan Aruch, it brings down that it is permitted to spit in a shul. Now, I do want to bring the Shulchan Aruch, but yes, Ben, what?
Yeah, I wanted to say the island I was talking about is Singapore.
Oh, Singapore. Okay. Okay, so let's pull up the Shulchan Aruch over here. So we have a Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch says that, now I should mention that the Alter Rebbe does not have chapter 151 in his Shulchan Aruch. There are a number of chapters that we don't have, unfortunately, either burned in the fire in Liadi, and basically there is missing many chapters in the Shulchan Aruch. We're very lucky, I guess, the ones we do have. But there are a number of chapters, and we don't have chapter 151 in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, but it is in the regular Shulchan Aruch, with chapter 151, and it's paragraph 7. It says, you are allowed to spit in the shul as long as you sheyeshafsheno baraglo, that you sort of wipe it with your foot. You
rub it into the carpet.
Rub it in, as long as you rub it in with your foot, or if there is gemi, that if you spit in it, it's not visible. I don't know exactly what gemi, like reeds maybe, he mentioned like sand or straw. Gemi is like something similar to that, but I don't know exactly what gemi. Do you know what gemi is, Ben?
No.
Okay, but it's some material that's, I guess, similar to sand or straw. So it's permissible either to spit and then rub it with your shoe, or you would be allowed to, if it's sand, it just, it'll be absorbed in the sand or in the straw. Okay, so then comes the Mishnah Brura and says that as long as it's not during the Shmona Esrei. During Shmona Esrei, it would be prohibited to spit in the shul. So I guess if the people are davening Shmona Esrei, you would be prohibited to spit in the shul while everyone is davening Shmona Esrei. Now, you should be careful that you shouldn't spit before your friend that will be disgusted with it. The Ari, Rabbi Yitzchok Luria, was Nizhar Merakika. It says he was careful never to spit.
He was a smart man.
Now, the Sharat Tzion, which is also written by the Mishnah Brura, says something very interesting. He says, this should be looked into. Those wealthy people that are careful in their house not to spit, if so, even in the shul, it should be usher for them to spit, because this is the Sharat Tzion. He's saying that, in other words, the Mishnah Brura in his other writing, in his other notes on the side, he says we should look into this. Yesh la'ayin, that the people who are wealthy, who don't spit in their house, for them it should be prohibited to spit in a shul, because our Gemara said that you learn it from your house. Now, if you're in your house, it's prohibited. If you're in your house, it's prohibited, like for these wealthy people. So in the shul, it should also be prohibited. And he says the fact that the Ari was careful not to spit, that was an extra. He went above the letter, beyond the letter of the law. According to the law, it's permissible. But for the wealthy people who don't spit in their house, for them it would seem to be prohibited to spit in a shul. Now that's a very interesting point. What I'm taking from that is that in the time of the Mishnah Brura passed away in 1933. That means in his day, it wasn't surprising for people to spit in a house. Now, I don't know the history of flooring and, tile floors, terrazzo, or whatever people were using, wood, but it sounds like in 1933, I don't know, in the time of the Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan, right? I think is the Mishnah Brura's name. So I don't know where did he live? Isaac, you probably know. Where was he based? In his country, in his place. It seems like
the Chafetz Chaim was up in Vilnius, up by Ukraine.
Okay, so they didn't have Yisrael Meir HaKohen and Radin.
Radin.
Where's Radin? It's Ukraine. Okay. somewhere near Ukraine. So the
That
question
area.
is, they didn't use cement floors. They didn't. What did they use? They spat it. They would spit in their house. I guess that's where they guess that was normal. 1933. So it is very interesting. So a few things are interesting. Number one is that it was normal in 1933 to spit in one's house. Number two, that the Sharatzian says yesh la'ayin. He doesn't automatically say it's prohibited. He says this should be researched. This should be looked into, that those people who are careful not to spit in their house, if so, in the base medrash and base knesses, it would be prohibited for them to spit.
You don't want to be treating the shul less than the way you treat your own house.
Well, but that's your own logic. But what we know is actually more than that, that this is our Gemara. We know the Gemara, that it says you compare it to your house. You're giving it as a logical thing. But that logic is based on our Gemara's statement that it says it's from our house. But we're learning it from the whole concept of spitting in a shul is learned, either prohibition or permit is learned from the house. But why does the Sharatzian say yesh la'ayin? We should think about it. Is it so? Why doesn't he say it's automatically? If you don't spit in your house, it should be it's prohibited for you to spit in a shul. Why does he only say yesh la'ayin? Why does he say it's prohibited? What do you think?
You may not spit in the house because your wife, Baruch Hashem, is a Meshugana who refuses to allow things. It doesn't mean it should then be usher in the shul.
Just one second. You have an answer, Ben, to this question?
Yeah, I think that in the 30s, like they say, the rich people might have had floors. The poor people had dirt floors. So he says the people that don't spit in the house shouldn't spit in shul. He doesn't say everybody should not spit in shul.
So along the lines of what you're saying, I think, I don't know if that answers the question fully. Why is he saying, let's look into this? Why doesn't he just say it's prohibited for wealthy people who have floors? So I think the answer why he says that is that the prohibition of spitting in a shul, is it going to be based on an individual who doesn't spit in his house? Or is it based on the communal issue of spitting in the house?
Yeah.
And if everyone spits in their houses, but I'm rich and I don't spit in my house, so therefore, you're going to say that I'm prohibited, you can spit and I can't? I don't know if that applies. The law is based on the custom, the common custom. If everyone spits in their house, then I can also spit in a shul. Maybe it should be prohibited. Maybe you look at me as an individual. Maybe not. Maybe you look at, what's the general consensus? People spit or people don't spit. I think that's why he says yesh la'ayin. I was going to say a different thing, that yesh la'ayin is based on the two ways of learning the Gemara. Do you learn it's a retraction from the previous? In other words, when the Gemara says that we learn like the house, is that saying that because in your house is this way, therefore Rava says you learn from the shoe, and if so, we're learning from the law of shoes.
Look into this.
In other words, this was a way of learning the teaching. I don't know, I'm a little nervous to say that, but that there are two ways of reading the Gemara that I just explained earlier, and based on those two reasons, maybe that could be there could be possibly a way, but I think really what he means is it based on the community or based on an individual? Now, I should bring let me just see the Piskei Teshuvos over here. It was the later commentary on the Mishnah Brura. He claims that in our days that the ground is floored and everyone is careful in their house not to spit. So the same thing should apply in a shul, should be prohibited to spit in a shul. And he says, for sure, you can't throw cigarettes and paper, and person should for sure be as careful as they are in the cleanliness of their house as they are for a shul. You shouldn't walk into a shul with mud on your feet and kiyotze b'zeh. He says, unfortunately, in today's day, in our Aviseinu Harabim, in ours, in our spiritual low level, he says many people are not careful about this. And he says it doesn't even help if the shul was built with a condition that it's not a full-fledged shul, because it's still people daven there. And then he says that, and this maybe touches on what someone mentioned yesterday, he says, and even in your house, that somewhere else it mentions this, that even in your house, and where did I see that? I saw that.
You shouldn't be spitting.
That here in the Rabbeinu Yoina commentary on the Gemara, he says that even in your house, in a place that's set aside for davening, in your house, if you have a certain place where you set aside, similarly, you should also be careful. You have to show with respect. Even if you have a special place that that's set aside for your davening, then you should be careful over there as well. Now, the problem with all this is, for many of us, there is an issue, and that is the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote the book Hayom Yom, which I believe he wrote in the 1940s, 1942. And he wrote over there that in the prayer beginning with Oleinu, the wording that we customarily follow is Shehem Mishtachavim Lehevel V'Larik. We say those words that we bow to Hashem, but the other nations, they bow to the vanity and nothingness. We're talking about idols and or false religion, false beliefs. Now, this version is also used in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah, and we make a point of not saying there's a few words that we don't add in, at least it's not part of the nusach, it's not part of the version, the text in the Lubavitch Siddur, that that those extra 5 words, they don't say it's not part of the text of the Nusach Ari Siddur. It is customary to spit after reciting the above phrase. So when you say Lahevel V'Larik, it's customary to spit after reciting this. The reason is that speaking generates saliva, and we do not wish to benefit from the saliva generated by uttering such words. So basically, we want to spit a little from the saliva that might have been generated, that was generated from these words, because we don't want to benefit, so to speak, from. So how is it permitted for us to spit in a shul when we say Oleinu nowadays? Now, this was not a problem in 1933, according to the Mishnah Berurah, or whenever he wrote the Mishnah Berurah, whatever year he passed away in 1933, and possibly in 1942. I don't know when flooring became popular, but that would be an interesting question. But I'm guessing that in 1942 they had floors all over America, right? Were they on dirt? No,
linoleum.
They had linoleum, and that was the popular. That was the wealthy. Was that for the wealthy or for the regular person?
Big thing in the 40s and the 50s. Yeah.
We need to get some elderly people to part of our. We're too young.
We're going to open it up, really.
I'm not sure, but I think when I went to the Cheder, there was no floor.
In what year?
It was packed. It was packed mud. That's what it was. Packed mud.
It wasn't 45, 46.
And that was
really?
Borough Park.
Yeah.
Wait, so you're serious? In 1946, there was still in America?
No. In the Cheder,
Israel.
the Cheder was in a DP camp in Austria.
In Austria. What about in America? The Golden Medina. No one knows.
Here. No, but I think the Wild West, they show wooden floors. The movies about the Wild West.
The Rebbe wrote this in 1942. I don't know if then it was maybe more popular. Anyway, my question is this an issue nowadays to spit for Aleinu, because nowadays we definitely, grown in our level of hygiene and germs and, all different types of etiquette, our whole custom, our lifestyle, the level of etiquette has changed. So the question is,
Rebbe,
to what extent?
Rebbe, you can spit now. You just got to keep your mask on.
Right. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
I know that people talk about spitting bowls like in a bar. They have spitting bowls.
They're called spittoons.
Spittoons.
Yeah.
So they used to show that in the movies too, from the West,
Right.
Wild West, that there were spittoons. So they weren't spitting on the floor.
So we should bring them into our shuls, spittoons, and pass them around during Aleinu.
Sure.
Like you pass around the tabak.
Use paper cups. Use a paper cup and
I
then
don't
go
think
throw it
so.
out.
I don't think
But
so.
anyway, the question is, possibly there is a heter here. I wonder if this is a heter. Maybe it's based on the fact that this is a way of honoring Hashem by us spitting when we talk about the idol worship. So it's not meant for, again, it's prohibited to do it in front of another person and someone else seeing and do it, and doing it in a way that in a place where kids are playing or whatever it is. But in a situation where it would be acceptable theoretically, and how do you fit with our Gemara that it's similar to your house and all that? Possibly it has to do with the fact that this spitting is not a spitting of a disgrace for the shul. It's a spitting of a way of honoring Hashem by saying that that we don't want to benefit even from the idol worship, from the saliva mentioned, from the words of mentioning an idol. Now, but I don't know if that's a good enough heter. Probably it's best to spit into a tissue. That would probably be ideal. Person has a little tissue, give a little click to the tissue. But anyway, I don't really know 100% the leniency, but that's something to think about. Zay gesund, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank you, Rebbe. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye.